Welcome to Hort Culture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. Well, welcome to fall, where it feels like all of us have done 18 billion things within a 5-hour period. Jessica just said before we started, it feels like she's lived 5 lives already today, or 5 days within less than a full day.
All before lunch.
Yeah, all before lunch. I think a lot of us are feeling like that in the fall, just because of the amount of things that we have to do. I know I'm extra caffeinated this time of year. How about you guys?
I'm extra caffeinated
I am
all periods
too.
of the year. Yeah. I'm consistently caffeinated. How about that? But especially in the fall, I guess, because number one, I love the fall, so I need that extra energy to just go extra hard.
Just want to enjoy it extra hard.
Yes, I want to enjoy it extra hard. That needs to be the title of this episode because it's a beautiful day here in Kentucky. At the recording,
we might get tagged.
it's warm.
Apple's gonna tag us. Is this appropriate?
Yeah,
Right.
I'm just gonna go full send. How about that? I don't know if that's any better. But yeah, fall's I don't know, a busy time in local extension offices, I know, and probably other organizations as well. But it seems like lots of field days going on, lots of end of season kind of gatherings and educational programs, but especially the field days. And there's some of those coming up. You know, we were talking about that before we hit the record button today. Do you guys have any that you would like to plug that's coming up immediately in the future? Some of them we may have already talked about in previous episodes.
Well, I have one that's happening in like 4 hours. So that one people won't probably be able to attend that one, but
it'll be like 3-4 weeks too late by the time this episode
our
posts.
annual Mercer County Ag Field Day that we're having tonight. So as Ray mentioned, it's odd because like you think fall's not going to be that busy, right? You think like, okay, the spring rush, the production season of summer, and then you're like, oh, the fall's going to get here. It's going to be a little more relaxing, right? But instead, there's all sorts of things.
Second spring, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah, it seems like people, I've said it before, but people are just in a gathering mood. I don't know if it's the seasonal change or the weather gets more moderate here in Kentucky. It usually gets more moderate, not always. As of recording today, it's going to be in the mid 80s. But yeah, the fall time of the year, it's just, I think people, it's a gathering time. And I always thought maybe the seasonality of Kentucky had something to do with that.
Yeah, I think sometimes being on campus, we don't, or I at least don't get as delusional about fall being not hectic because it's the time when all of the undergraduate students return to campus.
Oh yeah.
And it's a different city. Like it's a different city, different campus. And the excitement is in the air. There's football being played, roundup events with lots of straw bales and apples and gourds and stuff. And unfortunately, fortunately for our future selves, Alexis and I will have just come off of, we will have in the rear view, I think as of the posting of this episode, Mechanical Weed Control Field Day and our 25th anniversary for our Center for Crop Diversification.
Yeah, so, you guys have 2 big events that will be in the rearview mirror by the time.
I don't feel relaxed now, but you're hearing my voice in a time where we will be. So
yeah,
I'm just going to lean into that.
You're going to have to just project it forward, Brett, and be in that
some
space.
Matrix stuff going on right now.
Yeah, once these 2 events are behind you, and they're going to be amazing. I know you guys have had incredible interest, in those events. It's going to be great, and you're going to be super relaxed. You just,
to be fair, I'm not as stressed out as Alexis is because I'm not doing as much as she is. So
he's doing things that I'm not good at, so he can be stressed out over there.
The Mechanical Weed Control Field Day is, I mean, I guess so. Since it's now in the future past, we'll just give a huge shout out to Alexis and to Sarah Gerkink from Oak, the queens of my technical assistance agricultural world. Congratulations,
the queens of mechanical weed control, which is something that you may have done or are thinking of doing, and maybe you're just going to mow everything down and put in some cover crop because the end of September, mid to end of September, depending on where you are in Kentucky, can be cover crop season.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing to do for your gardens and gardens, farms, just unused beds in general. Just have some living roots in there.
That's a
Just something
good
going on.
good transition there from
Thank you.
instead
I
of
Alex,
appreciate
talking
it. Only
stuff.
Jessica caught
Yeah,
on where I was
I
like,
caught it
let's
yeah,
talk about things.
Alexis was
from like,
totally bringing us back
no,
around.
from talking about all of our meetings, so wrapping that
That's
back
going to
around
be
with
done. Yeah.
plants of all the fall things that can happen because the fall is also a very busy time
Mhm.
horticultural
Yeah,
wise.
Yes.
it's like it's a super important time. This is coming out late September when this is going to post up, and we got to thinking about that before we recorded today, and it's a busy time. I mean, I know that for home gardeners, plants are starting to regress. They're starting to kind of slow down and go away. And I've even talked to some homeowners this past week. They've already pulled up. They're sick of looking at tomatoes. They've pulled up their tomatoes, and their home garden is in a state of decline. The way they put
I,
it.
s- I saw a quote. It was, and I wish I could remember who said it, but it was like fall. The plants in the fall are the most wild because they have nothing to lose. And I was like, that just like hit me in a way because, we say that, plants are, we use maybe the word decline, but for a lot of our plants, they're, finishing setting seed.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing a lot of they're really pushing energy back down into the
Yeah.
root system. So like from an annual perspective, sure decline, right? Because they don't like the cold. They are dying. But I think
Mm-hmm.
for our perennials, we think of those is they're not declining and they're kind of
No.
wild and crazy right now because they're just trying to get the most out of the end of the year and put the most back into what is going to be happen next year. So I don't know.
No.
I just thought that was a fun way to think
So,
about
well,
it.
one of the things that brings to mind for me, there's a bonsai guy that I follow, and I'm sure he didn't invent it, but I've heard him say it that for him, he thinks of fall as the first season of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's when seeds are created, that's when roots are
Hmm.
reinforced, that's when you're sort of preparing, you're putting together your package that's going to take you as a plant, take you through the next year. That
Yeah.
seed gets set now. That's a baby embryonic plant with its starter food supply in a hard, mostly hard capsule kind of thing. Like that act of creating that thing, it's like that's the birthday of the plant, kind of.
Yeah.
Not to get too political, I'm just kidding.
Well, and I
Uh,
think I think for a lot of our farmers, it's that way too. I mean, they're finishing up the year. They're thinking about what didn't work so they can make the plans for next year. So they're having these like this, their plan for their baby farm of 2026 happens in 2025. And I think that that's like one of the ways farmers have taken a key from what nature does of, taking in everything from this year and starting to make those plans for next year to be more successful. And for some of our growers, they're putting plants in the ground and overwintering them. So that the baby starts now, and the first sales aren't going to be for several months. And I mean, Jessica could talk more, but it feels pretty similar even for livestock from a like planning perspective. What are you going to do in 2026? What was successful in 2025?
Right.
It's a interesting this is where I see a dividing point sometimes between home growers for home purposes and then commercial growers. This is where I start to see the branching out come in as far as the way that they view, as Brett said, the end of the season. Some people's ends are other people's beginnings, especially those commercial people.
well,
Um,
I have a quick vibe check question for those of you out in the field doing the real work out there. So this year, weather-wise, we're in the year of 2025. Um, Seems to have been hard to
mm,
grow plants.
boom and bust.
Yeah, it's the wetter than it needs to be, drier than it needs to be,
Yeah.
but never, those two crossing necessarily. So have you? What my question is, have you noticed like gardens and or commercial operations winding down earlier this year than is you would typically see?
Hmm. I see plants that got used to in home garden situations that are typically not irrigated. They looked pretty good if diseases were under control. They look pretty good. They look like irrigated gardens. They were getting frequent rains, and as long as diseases didn't overtake you, gardens and especially lawns looked amazing. Everything looked like it was irrigated. And then at a point in the growing season here in Kentucky, it just became very dry. And Brett, to answer your question short, I guess I saw things collapse more quickly than I normally would. I don't know if that's just because I noticed it because the transition was so sharp,
Mm,
or it affected the plant growing conditions, and then those high moisture conditions went away. It got very dry, so the plants reacted to that because of the root structure. Sometimes the roots follow the moisture as far as depth goes. But there's a lot going on. In my case, I've noticed in certain situations, especially for homeowners, mostly homeowners, people's gardens went down a little bit quicker than
mm,
normal.
I saw a mix of it. Alexis and I had an opportunity to go to a field day here in our county not too long ago, and where a lot of homeowner stuff has already gone down if they weren't doing regular irrigation. This
Yeah.
commercial grower in particular, we had so many heavy rains in the early spring, things flooded, things got put out later. So a lot of their crops were really just getting
Yeah.
going like
Yeah.
later in
Late.
this late in the
mhm,
summer, right? So I think
Hmm.
it really depends on your production system, and
Yeah.
if you could get things out early and the rain didn't when we had all that rain didn't inhibit you. But agree with Ray, a lot of the homeowner stuff of if they weren't doing regular irrigation, we saw once we got in this drought kind of spell that we were in, things went down pretty quick and
mm,
or disease and pests took over.
mhm,
Yeah, and I noticed. I didn't observe that in any place more than I did home lawns. We don't talk a tremendous amount on the show about home lawns, but that is the question I've been getting the last couple of weeks. It's pretty amazing. Early, every lawn looked beautiful. It looked like an irrigated golf course, and I've mowed more this year than I've ever mowed. Up until it got dry, and then I've not mowed. This is going on 4 weeks. I've not touched my lawn too awfully much at all. It's been hot. It's been dry. I don't want to get on there and do any damage. But the homeowner question of the day seems to be they're noticing weeds that are still kind of green in some situations, weeds like crabgrass that are more green than their cool season grasses that look very brown and very dormant at this point. So that's the question I've been getting here lately. I don't know about as far as county offices. Jessica, have you been seeing that also? As far as
Yeah.
lawn questions, I mean, people's lawns went from beautiful and lush to not beautiful and
Yeah,
lush real quick.
so we were extremely dry in our area, and that's what people were noticing, right? So
Mhm.
they were noticing, crabgrass because crabgrass was
Yes.
still, like, thriving and loving the conditions, so that was, like, the only
Mhm.
really green thing in their yard, so then people became obsessed with trying to control the
Yes.
crabgrass, which it's not the right time of year, and, you could add more damage to your lawn that way, or people who are already battling Bermuda grass, and, that's the only thing they could see that was still thriving in the conditions, wanting to control those. So, just that weather playing a big part in those weeds thriving and then,
Yeah, and that's the only thing that you see green out there is the weeds, and that once again, Jessica said it. That's not the time to even spot spray for weeds. Anytime it's this hot and this dry. As of recording today, when we're recording this, now we can't look into the crystal ball when this is going to be posting at the end of September, but if the weather continues hot and dry, that is not the time to do any kind of weed control because the way those products work. So you may want to hold off until you have adequate recovery and moisture because the golden rule for weed control is don't spray a weed that's not actively growing. You're not going to have favorable results from products. In short, I mean, and you're going to, as Jessica said, you're going to do some damage to your lawn, or you at the very least you're going to add some further stress to your home lawn. Now, going in,
Well,
September.
can I
Yeah,
ask a
yeah.
question
Go
real
ahead.
quick about so not some of unlike you all, I was not born knowing all this plant information.
Make it up.
Can you describe like what I'm not what does crabgrass look like and what does Bermuda grass look like? Because I think sometimes we like talk about it and people all assume that they know what it is. There's a point where I had to look it up. Like people kept talking about it. I was like, "What is this?"
I
So, like,
guess
how would you describe what it looks
easiest
like?
thing in Kentucky to recognize Bermuda grass, other than just doing what you said, Brett, to look it up, is I tell people to look a week after their first hard frost, and you're going to see these In a lot of Kentucky lawns, you're going to see large brown areas all of a sudden, and that's a common phone call we get. People's like, it's frosted, and 2 weeks later, we have these huge dead spots in our lawn. Did it kill our grass? Well, most of the situations, I'll go out and look at those large dead brown spots 2 weeks after the first hard frost in Kentucky, and that's either nimble or Bermuda. They're very closely related, and
Mm.
they look very similar. They're warm season grasses, but that's the easiest way I tell people to find them is you will see them 7 to 14 days after a hard frost in a Kentucky lawn because they're going to be brown areas of your lawn, and then make a mental note of where those spots are. You can also very easily look up those online, but it's actually very nice grass. You can mow them very close. It's soft, it's
Mhm.
thick, it's almost fluffy, except it's got the one Achilles heel here in Kentucky, zone 6 and 7 here in central Kentucky. Of It's dormant 6 to 7 months out of the year because it is a warm season grass.
Mm.
And if it wasn't for that one characteristic of Bermuda grass and nimblewheel, it would be a wonderful lawn grass like it is down south in the
Mm.
southern U.S.
And then what about crabgrass?
Oh, crabgrass. You will see it by its wavy seed heads. The way I pick it out in lawns right now, Jessica said, as she said, it's green now, and you'll see these sort of triangulate seed heads coming out from crabgrass, and they're angular and thin and narrow, and it's going to be putting up a prodigious amount of those seed heads right now. And it sort of looks grassy. It'll hide itself. It's slow and spreading, sometimes with a lighter colored center crown. But it's typically green when, if it's hot and dry, it's green when your cool season grasses are not green and looking nice. And you'll tend to notice those June and July in Kentucky because that's their prime growing season for crabgrass. But you'll notice the seed heads. That's the first thing you'll see that's growing above your lawn. And that's the only spots I'm mowing now that if I have a hot spot of crabgrass, and I do in my back lawn, I don't do a lot of weed control back there. And when I see those seed heads first starting to pop up on crabgrass, I mow those because I don't want those contributing to the excess seed bed that I already have in my lawn. So I will mow those and not let those go to seed. That's my version of low impact weed control in my back lawn. It's when I see those seed heads from crabgrass, I go ahead and mow those.
Yeah, I think that that the idea of a cool season and warm season grasses is another thing. If you're getting into this stuff, you're fresh to it, or you haven't read about it before, that might be something else to just look up about some of the seed mixes and all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. Now, Alexis, you love crabgrass. Is that correct? Am I quoting you correctly in that?
Uh, if by love you mean wants to burn
Loathe.
to the ground,
Oh,
She
yeah,
said loathe, Brett,
that's what
not
I meant.
love.
That's I
Loathe.
loathe. Got it.
Yes. Another L word.
yes, another L word, another a lot of choice words I have for crabgrass in particular. It is the bane of my existence, but
It produces so many seeds, and those seeds, once they're in the soil, they last for years and years and years. I mean, they've done trials where, even 30 years later, they've collected seeds, and I don't know the process, but they've germinated, still had a certain percentage germination rate. So that once you have them in your soil, you're going to be dealing with those for a long period of time. So
the
don't let,
only
if you
only
don't
thing I
like
can
crabgrass.
say, trying to look on the bright side, is it's because it kind of comes from like a rosette form where it all comes back to like one center point.
Yeah,
It is, as long as you get it before it is not, 3 foot wide, relatively easy to pull up.
very satisfying.
Like
Yeah,
satisfying to weed
versus
out.
right,
Yes.
it's satisfying versus Bermuda, the way it spreads through, rhizomes, it can be
Mhm.
very difficult to like manually remove, which is really frustrating if you're trying to avoid herbicide use. Manually pulling it is almost impossible to get it all versus crabgrass. You can go in and confidently say you got all of the active living plants. The seed bed is a whole other thing, which is why we have other techniques like mechanical weed control and cover crops
Yeah.
to combat those crabgrass.
If the weather, once again, we're talking about the weather as of today, we've made comments on that. But in the fall, going into October, around October, mid October, that's some of the best times of the year, October, November, to control those. And Brett mentioned that different weeds come up at different times of the year. There's summer, the summer season plants, weeds, and then there's the winter season weeds. Well, winter annuals germinate October, November in Kentucky, and you'll get a much better control of those if you do some broadleaf sprays then. So don't forget that.
Well, we've been talking a lot about, like, not a negative topic, but, like, combating weeds, right? Something that's like, but
Bring the
in the f
vibe up for us, Jessica. Bring
right?
the vibe up.
Bring it
But
up.
Come on.
something, in the fall that some I look forward to is opportunity to plant more trees because that's a prime time for planting trees, for dividing your perennials, sharing those around, still planting things out in your garden because you might think like I'm thinking of like your flower beds and things like that garden. But there's still like plenty of time, to do those kind of things and they
Yeah,
actually
that's a great
thrive
time to do
better,
that.
especially when it comes to trees versus planting a tree in the middle of the summer is not going to be very happy. They much prefer being planted in the fall and have a better chance of survival, we'll say, to
Well,
be
here's
Yeah,
something
positive.
plant.
here's something negative I can say about that. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm not
Red.
gonna bring the vibe back down. I think, yeah, planting fall stuff in the fall and getting a nice like bed of mulch down, it's so satisfying to have that the crisp air, beautiful pops of color. Maybe you throw a couple of mums out, maybe even some pots, maybe in the ground. Who knows? I love that. Yeah, throwing some annuals out. Yeah, we mentioned cover crops a little bit, but cover crop seeding time is like, man,
Mhm.
I don't really have a space to do it now, but I used to. I used to love that time of year of just these little short carpets of cover crop coming up.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
Trails cover crop of choice. I know there's so many good options, but we're entering fall. We're in fall here in Kentucky as of the end of this podcast. But what's everybody planting this year? I know we've had this discussion before. I
I
forget
usually
when, a
do a
year or two ago.
mix. Yeah,
Yeah,
I usually do a
yeah.
mix. For my purposes, I like to use that cover crop as a mulch when I take it down, so
Mm.
that impacts what I grow. So, like I always incorporate some sort of like winter wheat or winter rye
Yeah.
because it creates a really nice mat when I'm like flail mowing it down, and then I can plant right into it. Versus, you know, and like I'll add a legume in there or something, but
Yeah.
for nitrogen fixation and for weed control. But for those purposes, I like that. If I know I'm going to till it in and not use it as necessarily a mulch, I'm just looking for more, bio matter to go into the soil.
Mhm.
Then I'll go with something a little more lush. I like a red clover in my mix.
Yeah,
It's
like a crimson
pretty.
or red.
Yeah,
Crimson
crimson
winter kills a
clover,
little bit
it's
more.
pretty.
Yeah.
And then, some sort of like winter pea or something like that. I've done a vetch, winter
Mhm.
wheat, and crimson clover mix the past couple of years, and that's kind of been good across the board.
If you look at, I'm kind of pleased about this, but I've noticed over the last 4 or 5 years, order sources for cover crops for home gardens. Even I know commercial cover
Mhm.
crops have always kind of been a big thing, but for home gardens, it's pretty wild. You can get 8 12-way mixes now for home
Mhm.
Oh
gardeners,
wow.
and it's kind of wild. They'll have the peas in there, and they'll have annual rye, which comes up in 3 to 5. I mean, super fast. But it's all the things, Alexis, you just mentioned. But
Mhm.
these mixes are like 6-way, 8-way mixes are real common now. When you just
And
jump
in
on
small
your,
quantities, like if you
yeah,
have 5 raised beds, they now have quantities. It used to be, you have to buy 10 pounds of cover crop, and it's
yeah,
Yeah,
you don't
like
need that, but you can buy half a pound now,
yeah. It's really
and
cool. I love
get
it.
like
um,
5 different seeds of 10 pounds each and have
or
to mix your own, and it's
Exactly.
yeah,
like,
That's right,
oh
Brad.
god.
you're
Yeah,
like, "I don't need
those
this many turnips."
those mixes became like really hot within RCS there for a little bit. And people
Oh
were
yeah.
all about the mixes, and there was this whole question of how much biodiversity within the mix is actually even matters versus it's just sort of like a vibe. It's like, oh, I got a 15-way mix out there, and like three quarters of it didn't germinate. Like, okay, it's a nice stand
Yeah.
of winter wheat and
Yeah,
some
it's
Austrian winter
your
pea.
old standards are the
Yeah,
ones that are doing the job out there. Yeah.
but I always thought they were cool nonetheless. Yeah. We so Alexis, you mentioned rye. Do you have any issues with any like allelopathy? And what is allelopathy?
So allelopathy is going to be the natural root. In this case, I think for rye, it's root exudates, which means it's the plant does not want competition, right up
Mm.
it's sucking up its water and nutrients, so it's going to put a chemical out into the soil right around it, that is going to keep seeds from germinating, which for weed control you can use to your advantage, right? Like Ray was saying, some seeds live in the ground for 30 years, but if we can keep them from germinating, they're more likely to be, killed off in some way. So people will use rye for weed control. So I don't, because I go in with plugs when I'm planting into a cover crop that's not been like tilled in necessarily, which is once you till it in, you kind of disrupt that little allelopathic zone it's created for the most part. But if I'm going in, I'm not tilling, and I'm going in with plugs, meaning that it's a plant that's already germinated, so I don't have to worry about that.
Mm.
Personally, it's more of like I don't want to smother anything, but it is something. And I think for rye, don't quote me on it, but I want to say it's like 2 weeks that the allelopathy kind of stays in the ground, so you can use that to your benefit. To keep things from germinating and then go in 2 weeks later and seed if you would like.
Yeah, people sometimes may be familiar with walnut as just an example of like a
Yeah.
tree
Mhm.
where, yeah. So what about you, Jess? You're the person here who's doing some actual
Mhm.
size and has some fields, or I guess one of the two people. Just speak for myself. As someone who's doing vegetable side though, like what's your cover crop?
Well, to
Vibe.
be fully transparent and honest here, it depends on when the plastic gets pulled out,
I was just going to
with the
ask you
raised bed,
about the plastic
and
pulling process.
that plays into it because we've
Yeah.
done some rye before, um, but it really depends on how late those crops go
Hmm.
because time this airs, we still might have a few tomatoes, but we will definitely still have peppers going
Yeah.
probably at that time. So
Hmm.
that gets kind of tricky in with it because some of those cover crops you have to get in earlier than you think.
Yeah.
Now, I can speak for my father, though, who does grow row crops. He does a mix of wheat and crimson clover and all of that on his
Hmm.
fields during the dormant season. But then he's also using that for cattle feed and then also incorporating, with it no till when it's rotation of corn and beans and all of that stuff. But yeah, it really depends on how long of production we have going. If we can get in and put different cover crops back on, or if we're just going to try to incorporate some organic matter in once that plastic is pulled up in the form of like composted manure or something else like that, just because we still have things going a
So
lot
much
later.
later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's the
and that
hardest part. Yeah, is if you still got things growing and like it's still economical, right? Because sometimes you still have stuff growing and it's like it's 5 tomatoes, like it's not economical. It's better off to just finish
Hmm.
it. But if it's still economical, it's hard, and that's like personally something I've been like wrestling with my rotation, because I need that on my fields. I know I need that cover crop, and it just lends itself to what I'm trying to do. But
Hmm.
it doesn't work always, and it doesn't work with the types of crops I'm doing. So I've had to incorporate what I'm like, basically just uh, plastic covered beds, like a silage tarp that has no plants in them, over winter, because I'm doing that on the crops that were late to finish, so they don't get a cover crop, but I can still cover the soil. And I think the ultimate thing here for people who maybe are struggling with but I don't want to kill my peppers, they're still doing good, but I want a cover crop. It's kind of trying to figure out a rotation of, all right, I might have 2 beds with cover crop, 2 beds with just plastic so that the soil doesn't go away, and then maybe 2 beds in coal crops or overwintered crops, and then you just kind of cycle through those things, because as a reminder, the point of sustainability is not just environmental sustainability; it's also economic sustainability, and just like your lifestyle, like farming or gardening or whatever has to be sustainable on multiple things to be truly sustainable. Because I feel like sometimes that word gets a bad rap of like, well, you're not doing the best thing for the environment. Well, I'm getting a good average here. And sorry, I'll get on my
Yeah.
soapbox about that. So I
If
should
if
say,
your approach shaves years off of your life because you're staying stressed, 24/7
yes,
year
exactly.
round, or if all of
Right.
your ligaments in your knees and elbows don't work anymore because you did this thing that's really low impact on the environment,
Yeah.
but you are toast at 37. I have a little bit of some elbow problems from some of that. Um, so I have a question. Do you all find you're kind of talking about this decision at the end of the season of like when to say enough's enough? Do you, from your cash crop or from your whatever primary target crop, do you find that over time and with more experience, you become more or less ruthless about saying we're done?
Oh man, I'm more ruthless. I mean, I started that years ago, maybe 20 years ago. I started getting more ruthless as far as terminating crops when I was actually growing more commercially. Alexis brought up an awesome point. As Alexis and Jessica were talking a minute ago, of when do you terminate crops? With tomatoes and peppers, how far do you have to walk to harvest that whatever quantity you're trying to harvest? Does it make sense? But
Mm.
really, when I'm sick of looking at it now, I used to feel bad about taking down an heirloom tomato that just won't stop, that it's grown 20 foot and it still
We've had
is
enough
going.
brandywine. We've
I've
had
got one
enough.
tied to, and after this episode, I'm going to go out to my deck, and there's one that's grown up into the second floor deck. And it keeps going, and it's got all these beautiful beefsteak tomatoes on there. It's toast. I am sick of watering that thing. So I am team termination as far as my home garden goes. No economic decisions. It looks ratty. It's not as thrifty as it once was. I'm team termination, Brett.
What about y'all?
I think with us, it comes down to because we do farmers markets, and that's every Saturday, every
Mhm.
one day midweek. We get to the point personally where it's almost like, well, it's football season. We really like to watch some football and
Mm,
have other things going on, but we pay attention to the tomatoes. How are they going? Are they starting to slow down? And then we also do a fungicide spray schedule with our tomatoes
Mhm.
and why. And then as soon as we stop that, and I think I've mentioned this before on here, as soon as we decide, all right, we're done, doing this, they're all going to go down, right? Because
mhm,
that's just how it works in Kentucky. So I
Mhm.
think that's kind of our thing. We just go out and evaluate and be like, all right, they're like even with us doing these fungicide sprays, doing all of our regular maintenance, they're slowing down, right? There's
Mhm.
fewer to pick.
The days are getting shorter,
The
just
days
the
are getting
sunlight, the
shorter,
reaction to that, yeah.
and then that kind of makes it where it's like, all right, we're done. Right? It's
Hmm.
maybe
So,
go to a few
but
other
do you
markets.
find that to be easier or harder to do as time goes? Like,
It has gotten significantly easier,
okay,
but for our life, right? Because now we have
Strudel.
children and we have,
right?
other things going on that, as we mentioned earlier, that sustainability. Do you want to, like, work yourself to death and not
Hmm.
enjoy other parts of life as well, right? So, it's made it easier as we have progressed in this career of growing produce.
As we talk about balance, that's the hardest sell I've ever had in extension, especially well for primarily for home gardeners, because we have all these charts and all this nice information on gardening in the fall, starting out crops beginning this time of year. I'm looking at you like leaf lettuce and spinach and all the cool season crops that are there have such incredible eating quality in the fall. But that's a tough sell, and I think it has to do with Brett quality of life. People have went through the season, the primary season of growing, and at some point they're kind of done along with the plants. But I haven't worked with a high percentage of home gardeners specifically that do that fall segment of garden crops, and I think it's just because of what you said. I think the life balance kicks in, and they're kind of done.
Yeah, I do. Well, I do think that one thing that people could try is to skip the summer garden. I know that sounds
Boom.
crazy, but what did you say? Boo
Yeah.
or boom?
I said boom.
Yeah, skip the summer garden.
What do you have against heat and sweat, Brett? Really?
Can't do that.
Yeah.
Tomatoes are king.
I'm
You
very
must
good at
Tomatoes.
both,
suffer.
so I don't know what I have against
You
it. But
must suffer.
yeah, I'm a world champion, a world sweat champion. But I think you know in the middle of the season, that's when you have a lot of folks who have a lot of stuff available. Like it's great to be able to walk out your back door and get that, but I'd rather go and buy it from Jessica. That like you'll let you all go out there and sweat and pick it, and then in the fall have some kale plants, have some
Mhm.
lettuce, have some stuff like that. But I think another thing that was the reason I asked about the whether it gets easier or harder to say to say goodbye every year. It just it was one of the funny things working at the South Farm, and we'd have students who come out and do this apprenticeship where they spend 100. I think someone just told me 100 hours that they work out at the farm doing various hands-on tasks. They're harvesting, they're weeding, they're doing irrigation, whatever. And when they come out there, like their sense of like scarcity and also how delicate they are with everything
Mm-hmm.
is they're very delicate. And if they were going to thin beets, they're going to save all the little beet thinnings and then try to replant them somewhere else and do all this.
Yeah.
And it was a similar thing because I mean, Annie, my wife, grew up gardening some, but we did a big garden there for a while, and seeing her over the course of the several years just becoming I would say significantly less precious about the things and being like, well, I
Every
don't have
seed
time
is
for saving
precious.
this and doing this and all these other things. And it's just one of those fun things to see people. Because the other thing I think is like transplanting. You'll see people handling transplants
Oh
like
yeah,
are the most fragile thing in the world, and then you see these people like on the back of a
There's
setter, and they're like boom, 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 just like
yeah.
hammering them in the ground.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, so these things are actually pretty pretty robust,
People
huh?
are so disturbed when they see me like pulling transplants out of a plug tray because I'm like just grabbing a fistful of whatever's above and yanking it out of the tray, which is the exact opposite of what we tell people to do. We're like, oh no, you want to be gentle with the
Wrap it
roots
gently
and
at the base and
massage them out. And like,
massage it
yeah,
out.
that's true. But like, there's
Nature
nothing I
versus
love more than
nurture.
literally just grabbing a chunk of them and just ripping 20 plugs out at one time.
And
This
it,
isn't going to
Definitely.
be the
it
hardest thing that happens to you this year,
Alexis is
bud.
team tough love.
exactly what Brett said, taking those transplants out and on a water wheel setter and just like shoving them as hard as you possibly can into the ground, right? And then they're
You guys are so fortunate. You mean you got to actually sit on the setter? I was the one following and had some loser sitting on the setter that missed every third plant. So I had to carry them with me. I had to walk. What are you talking about?
I put my time in following the tobacco setter doing
Oh
that.
yeah.
But
We switched off. So,
yeah.
but Brett,
In
that's
case
a great
anybody's
point.
not familiar with this is a thing, an implement that comes off the back of a tractor, and it's got these wheels that you lower it down, and as you roll, it punches a hole in plastic or in the soil.
Like a slit seater, basically.
Yeah, it's like poke some
Essentially.
holes, and then there can be one or two seats that actually sit on this thing and get to ride along with the tractor, and you're pulling out transplants and pushing them into these holes. It's a whole process, but then there's people who have to walk, and it's usually they're pretty low on the totem pole. Never was there myself. I just
Brett
was
never had to
immediately,
endure.
yeah. Don't know what that's like, but you guys can share what you're. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's a whole process, but good point, Brett. Yeah, when you're doing things to scale, your tolerance for rough treatment of plants maybe changes. I felt the same way the first time I used a dibble bar and did my first like forestry program,
Oh
many
yeah,
years ago. And I'm like, now be very cautious. By the end of that week, and I'd planted 20,000 tree seedlings, I was like, just basically slinging them at depressions in the soil. You're
yeah,
fine. You're fine. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's
Same with
And it's
harvesting.
just a matter of like that skill and comfort and all of those things
yeah.
happening, and that's part of the fall too. Like you start to have this almost this sense of like, oh, it's time to put cover crop out. Oh, it's time to clean this
Yeah.
up. Oh, it's time to do this thing, and you associate it with the football games or the cooler weather or the whatever. It's I
Yeah.
don't know. It's just
Well,
an
and
interesting
the
intersection.
benefits of terminating something early outweigh the last of your, energy. But even if you just look at the crop itself, like that getting a cover crop in is
Yeah.
going to be more economic for than and better for, again, that going back to the three prongs of sustainability. Maybe it's better to get that cover crop in than it is to, pick another 10 pounds of tomatoes or whatever that
Well,
is. And so
Alexis, Jennifer doesn't care about the three prongs of sustainability. She will not let me cut those ratty flowers down in
the
our
zinnia,
square
well,
beds. Yeah,
yeah.
and I so much want to go down there and throw some annual rye down or some crimson or whatever my cover crop's going to be this year. I'm itching to get that tiller out because I love it, and I want to just sling some soil and put
That's
some
where you
seeds
say,
down.
if I don't do it by this date, it can't get done. And then, it doesn't happen. So you just kind of have to like
Is that
have a
how
date.
would that go, Ray?
Oh, it would go. I would be like Alexis said so, and that may gain me some traction. But if I
Yeah,
say
now
so, then it don't
now we're
matter.
talking.
That she knows
Alexis
Alexis.
said,
Alexis knows
Alexis gets
Jennifer.
her zinnias down by the end of
But
yeah.
September.
Alexis is look, and I'll show her pictures, and you'll have beautiful flowers, and then that's going to do me in for another 2 weeks. So thanks,
No,
Alexis.
my zinnias are looking pretty ratty
Are
and
they
I don't care. Like,
leaf spot?
die
Huh?
already.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. I'm like, I'm done with you.
Yeah, well, we're on the topic of flowers, and Jessica started to steer us in the direction of landscapes. We can't leave that hanging. Jessica started us out talking about it's a great time of year to get trees and shrubs in the ground.
Is anybody
Uh,
planting any trees or shrubs this year?
well, I've got this little cut leaf sumac that I need to get in there. Actually, I
Oh,
may wait. I got a friend gave me this beautiful little tree that's
wow.
got lots of form, but I think that I may actually grow that guy under some grow lights this winter. He's a little too tender. I'm going to grow him off. But if he was just a little bit older, I would be putting that tree in the ground because it is a good time to do that.
Mhm.
But you were speaking of flowers, Alexis. What are we dividing this time of year as far as perennials in the landscape? I mean,
Pretty
there's
much any of your
bunches.
herbaceous
Mm,
perennials, if they've gotten a little too big for their britches, can be divided. This time of year
You
is a
said
good time to put.
herbaceous?
Herbaceous is so basically if it's think of something like a coneflower echinacea where there's no woody parts on it versus
mm,
something like a hydrangea is more woody. It can be divided, but like an easy rule of thumb is sort of those herbaceous things. And
like
you know,
hostas, daylilies, stuff like that.
mhm,
All those
hostas,
things.
daylilies. You're not going to go divide a rose though, right? Because the growing point is all from one area.
Yeah.
And by
Mm.
divide, we mean you're taking a shovel and you're chopping through, kind of right through the middle of something.
And that's one of those tough loves too. I used to be very delicate about that, and some you
Mhm.
have to be a bit more delicate. But now with daylilies, I literally just take a dull shovel and bludgeon it until it falls apart, and it's fine. It's
Yeah,
fine.
they'll
But
come
now's the
back.
time of the year to do that. Yeah, it'll do that. What kind of bulbs, as far as that is going in the ground in the fall? I mean, there's lots of those that go in now in
All
the fall for
the
spring. Yeah,
yeah, everything a lot of the things you see blooming in the spring is when you wanna get them in for the fall. Your daffodils, crocus, tulip, what else do we have? Hyacinths.
hyacinths.
Um, so yeah, that's to just think about anything that you normally see in the early spring and you're like, "Man, I wish I had some of those." You're like, "That's the time to do it in the fall."
Yeah,
Mm.
do all of
Mhm.
that. And Brett already mentioned what mulch. I have desperately got to get some mulch down because I did not do that this summer, and we had so much rain. Most of it ended up in the street because I used the wrong type of mulch on a sloped bed
It
that has a
floated
little bit of float.
away.
It did. It was not no float mulch because they all float down here apparently where my house is. So I've got to desperately, I really need to get some mulch down because I don't water anything, of course, during the wintertime, and I have boxwoods and things. No young plants, but a younger lilac that needs to be mulched because I want to, get the benefits of that mulch through the winter of insulation and moisture retention. So that's on my checklist as far as the landscape goes. Anybody got anything else that you're kind of any projects in lawn or landscape that's going down this fall?
I have a nice tray of some native plants that I need to get in the ground, and as
Oh,
all gardeners do,
Mm.
we get
yeah.
excited and we buy a bunch, and then they kinda sit there for a little bit,
Like
but they're
trees
doing
or
okay.
shrubs?
They're okay. A lot of native perennials,
Oh,
pollinator-friendly things to add
Mm.
to my
cool.
yard, but, yeah, gotta get those in.
Well, you
Yeah,
gotta
what
give a
a
plug to the pollinators this time of year too, as far as garden cleanup. How does pollinators play into that? We haven't talked about that. As far
Uh
as the way we kinda manage if you're kinda thinking of pollinators?
To leave a lot of your things instead of, like,
Mhm.
completely cleaning your beds out,
Like I
because
wanna do, like I
a
wanna
lot
do.
of, like, the little native bees, they like to
Mhm,
use the twigs and stuff,
mhm.
to overwinter in. You might have, we have been something we have not talked about. At our household, we have been rearing lots of caterpillars this summer. We've had swallowtail caterpillars on our kitchen table. Now we are in full monarch mode. The monarchs will have already flown and done their thing times this has aired, but we have 5 monarch caterpillars currently living on my kitchen table on their plants. But when you clean out your garden, sometimes you're gonna clean out, not only those native bees that I mentioned, but some of our butterflies and moths, they overwinter in their pupal state in cocoons, and you risk, removing them as well. Just like we talk about leave your leaves out in your
Mhm.
yard, right? We haven't mentioned that, but a lot of critters overwinter underneath the leaf cover out in the yard, like the Luna moth and, a couple of other ones that are really cool.
Yeah, so that's I got a question last week, and I was thinking cover crops in my head, but this was a native gardener, and she was very much aware of the habitat. She was becoming aware of the habitat necessary for some of our native bees, in her case. But she had lots of questions on that, and it made me back up and think. Well, in some cases, you already have enough cover out, natural cover out there, if you, depending on what you're growing. And then her question was exactly what you just stated, Jessica. So, we kind of came up with a plan with her basically is leave things in place longer. And if she wants to do that late winter into spring, some cleanup, that leaves habitat for a period of time through the winter time to get the benefit for those native pollinators. So it made me kind of stop, pause, and think. Once again, she didn't really need a cover crop after we started talking because she had enough coverage there of the soil to where, it just wasn't necessary. So, yeah, good point.
But I think one thing we may be missing and didn't talk about. I know we're getting close to time, but um, some people, some crazy people, have pots and plants in pots.
Oh, man.
I'm not talking about just bonsai, though. I am talking about bonsai. But like some people, some of those things are tender, or they're
Mhm.
even tropical, or semi-tropical or something. So like, when do you all have that, or do talk to people who do, and
Yeah.
when's the timeline for that? Like, I know we have frost dates, but there's some things that are even more sensitive than that.
When I worked with nurseries, of course, they do large operations of hilling in. They accumulate plants that are in pots together,
Hmm.
and they'll use something typically like a mulch of some kind to kind of make those one unit to provide insulation. I don't know, Brett, do you do anything like that? I know that you have several things in containers. How do you deal with that through the winter? I can't remember if we talked about that
So
before.
one of the things I think to keep in mind is like, would that plant be hardy if it existed in the ground? And if the answer is yes, then that's I treat it one way. And if the answer is no, I treat it another way. So in other
Mm-hmm.
words, is this thing gonna, if I leave it outside, is it would it and it was planted in the ground, would it die? And so those things I would typically the hilling in probably isn't going to be quite enough for that. Depending on what it is, so things like a camellia or an azalea, or in the bonsai world, or some of the tropical-ish trees, like I guess like lemon trees and orange trees and stuff like that would be in that ballpark. I guess I don't know. That's not something that people tend to have in pots and sometimes put outside. They almost can become house plants in some cases, or
Mm-hmm.
if you have a greenhouse or
Yeah.
you have some other way of bringing them in. One of the interesting things with the bonsai stuff is that the trees still prefer, especially the deciduous trees. They still, well, not all of them. No, even the deciduous trees prefer a little bit of sunlight through the winter. So it's, people sometimes want to just put it in a garage or put it in somewhere like that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I tend to leave my potted stuff outside almost the whole year.
Mm-hmm.
But all of those things are hardy in this environment if they were in the ground.
Do
It's
you
the
like
fact that they're
mass
in
them
the pot.
together? Did you say
I put them
the
together
one?
as like I have a little
Okay.
mini greenhouse that I put
Mm.
up over them,
Yeah.
but I'm only really worried if it gets below 20. I wasn't trying to push this into this. I was thinking more of people who have banana trees, or they have things in pots that
But
they
this is
maybe.
this is the season of I have got to calm down on the outdoor plants that have to be moved in the winter because I have no more space. We've gotten so much,
Calm
and
down, Ray.
yeah, all the amaryllis and all the
Yeah, yeah,
typical
yeah.
things that I moved to the front porch and the back porch. I filled up my office. I've already started that process, and now I'm starting to dry down some plants and.
Ooh,
Uh,
this is a good time for me to ask. So, Alexis, I have an amaryllis that you grew that's still rocking. Um, what's the deal? What do I do? How do I?
Yeah, that's good timing. So when this comes out, it's perfect timing. You want to force dormancy on that plant because it when it comes out of dormancy is when it signals to bloom. So you're going to force dormancy on it. I don't have my notes in front of me as far as like exact number of weeks. That's easily something you can look up. But the hardest part I think I can explain through is by forcing dormancy, you're doing that by putting it in the dark. And it doesn't have to be like complete darkness. I put
Hmm.
it in like my attic stairwell. There's windows up there. It's not a big deal. You want it to be maybe a little bit cooler, of an area, and you want to stop watering it. And so
mhm.
which feels like it's killing it. But remember, amaryllis are a bulb, so they're going to store nutrients and all that kind of stuff in the bulb. So you're not gonna kill it by doing this for a few weeks. You do this for Ray might know off the top of his head because he's working on a program. But what is it, 9 to 12 weeks or something?
Yeah,
Maybe
I usually
longer?
say 8 and 8, like 8 dormant, and then 8 to 12, just exactly what you said. After you bring it out of dormancy until it blooms on average. It varies a little bit, I guess, from what I'm reading. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
from paper whites to
Mm,
amaryllis, something like that. So,
yeah.
anyways, you force it to go dormant for roughly 8 weeks,
Hmm.
and then you bring it back out. Everything's died back. You're like, this thing is not alive. What have I done?
Mm.
Put it in some sunny area. Put it where it's going to be warm because these are tropical plants, and then you start watering it again, just lightly. Keep the soil just lightly moist,
Mm.
and then you'll see it sprout. You'll see green come up, and then with amaryllis you're going to see a bloom stalk pretty fairly quickly, and then it's going to feel like it takes forever to actually bloom.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
um,
So if it has green, like green on it right now,
mhm,
leave the
mhm.
green on it when I put it into dormancy.
Yeah, yeah. I just let it die back naturally.
Let it
It's
die
kind of
back.
how I
Okay.
keep a
No.
general look on, is it going dormant or did I just cut the
Do
leaves
I need
off?
to do anything? Do I need to top it off with any media or anything like that? Or
Probably not unless it's outgrown the pot. I usually just kind of leave them in their pots. If I'm going to repot something, I do that when it is the most actively growing,
yeah.
which for amaryllis is going to be spring.
Okay.
And
Perfect.
I grow mine year round. Anymore, the last 4 or 5 years, we have several different types, and um, I just grow them year round. But when we bring them in, we set them on a 12-hour timer because that's what our plant lights are next to the window. They're on a 12-hour, and they never stop growing. They
So
just
you're
grow
saying
year
you
round.
don't induce dormancy?
No, but now what I find, and Alexis probably has more info on this, is my bloom period's a bit more random because I
Mhm.
don't induce dormancy at all now. I just
Okay.
because I like the foliage of amaryllis, and we like to have something green on the inside of the house while
So
it's
do you
too
cut
much
it
rain.
back?
No, no, the leaves will naturally senesce, or they'll naturally just they'll turn yellow and die in kind of in these successions.
Ours just keep getting longer and longer.
Yeah, amaryllis can get
It is
huge.
they so they're gonna bloom even if you're putting them under artificial lights. They really
Hmm.
are only gonna bloom once a year. Now
Yeah.
we try and make them bloom in the winter, which is when they're gonna bloom
Hmm.
in their native, like I think it's like Australia or South America or something. It's a different, like the different hemisphere. So we're trying to keep up with that timeline of where
Yeah.
they're native to versus what Ray is doing. They're still going to bloom probably once every 10 to 12 months,
Yeah.
but
Hmm.
he's letting them choose when they do that. And so he's not
Mhm.
forcing dormancy. They're going to naturally do it. So, but it's not always in my experience, which is probably less than Ray's, where I've done that. It's sometimes more frustrating to
Hmm.
Yeah, if you like to
wait on
control
them.
things, or if you're like forcing for the holidays, what Alexis said is exactly what you want to do. But I just kind of let those go natural. And I think I get 2 or 3 types of amaryllis now that I thought were pretty small. And on average in the wintertime, I'll get a bloom period in the winter and then one mid to late summer. But they're kind of spread out. Like Alexis
How
said, they're random, but the bloom
And
stalks
the
on those are
species
48 inches
matters.
tall.
okay.
Yeah,
They're
I mean, like
huge.
How
Ray's
big of a pot is this in?
I've got like 6 or 8 pots of those now, and they're probably 4 to 6 gallon pots. Uh,
Oh, wow.
Oh,
but in each pot is 20 to 30. So, and some of those bulbs are
Oh, so you're doing them
huge.
as like a little
I do
I have mine in
clusters.
like a big window
forest, a
box.
little
You
grove.
have yours in window
Yeah.
boxes?
Yeah, I have like
Yeah.
10
I
of them in
see.
a window
I'm
box.
glad
But
that
like
you were also
you don't
surprised, Jessica, because
I
I
am.
felt like an
I
idiot.
I have a very sad one on my back porch right now, and I've just kind of been like saying like, let's see what happens because it's going to go along with. I haven't mentioned this to you all yet. I have a poinsettia that I've never repotted. It's in the foil. I've had it for 3 years,
Oh,
and it's
wow.
huge.
Love
And we're
it.
just seeing
Right.
if the poinsettia is
Let's
just going to
go.
keep doing it. So amaryllis, Franken amaryllis experiment as
Amaryllis
well.
they get huge when you grow them through, and I do the bulbs for programs, and Alexis knows I'm kind of cheap. I don't like to, but that's the way I grow bulbs for programs too. And I have some started at the office. I have 50 or 60 bulbs going right now. But yeah, I'm very curious about the poinsettia. I've never grown those. I know you
Mm.
can, but I've never grown those over through the season. So cool.
Fingers crossed, it's still thriving. It's kind of a mean experiment to leave it in
And
the
you just
same
bring it
container.
in and
No,
inside your.
it's just stayed in my my
You're
house in a
trying to
window.
bonsai. You're trying to bonsai the
I
poinsettia by
think I
constricting its
have
roots.
Yeah.
I like that.
But this end of
accidentally.
season, yeah, you have to make all these decisions on your plants that you have outside, like Brett was saying a few minutes ago. You have to make that decision before the first
So
frost.
just
So,
take a look and check and see what the temperature, because I'll just monitor the temperatures, and it's I don't bring it
yeah.
in by date. I bring it in the first time that it's going to get below 50 at night for some of the stuff that's really sensitive, and the below whatever 45, but 20s where I watch out for stuff that's hardy but is in a pot.
Hmm.
20s.
Cool.
Yeah.
So quick recap. Don't cut down all of your native plants. Leave them for the bugs and the birds. If you've got plants in pots, figure out what their hardiness is. Are they tropical, or are they something that would survive in the ground here? And then treat those two differently. If you have the ability to put in cover crop, it's a great thing to do, but overall, cover the soil somehow. So living roots are the best way. Next would be a natural mulch. Third would be like a plastic so that your soil doesn't run away with the wind and snow. What else? One more.
Lawns and
Plant your
landscapes. It's
trees.
plant your
Divide
trees.
your divide your perennials. Plant your trees, and then don't spray your weeds quite yet
When if your
in
lawn
your
is
lawn.
stressed, don't spray, and do get your fertilize down in October. November is the best time to fertilize. And if you need to do any kind of reseeding, spot reseeding, or larger scale reseeding, do that during the cool seasons of the month. That's
And
usually September, beginning of October.
soil testing
Oh,
along with
Yes,
thank you,
that.
Jessica. How
great,
could we
Jessica.
forget that in this conversation this long into the conversation? Thank you.
And
You
Ray
will
is
get
the
your
amaryllis
results.
king, and Alexis does not love crabgrass.
Yes, in
I
summary.
think I think we've nailed it. If you guys have any questions about, what you should be doing in fall, or, maybe what cover crops are best, we do have some resources on our CCD. We have I use it all the time, like personally, a calculator for cover crops. And so like whether you're doing a 4x4 raised bed and you want to know how much winter wheat you can put in there, you can put those numbers in and get that all the way up to acres and acres. So, and it's got a bunch of different options for you. So I just like to recommend that because it's something that can be really helpful if you're not quite sure where to go. But if you've got questions about, anything we talked about today, feel free to reach out to us via our email. You can find that in the show notes. Follow us on Instagram at Hort Culture Podcast. You can shoot us a message over there if you've got any questions. And we are happy you guys were with us today. We hope that as we grow this podcast, you will grow with us. And have a great one. See ya.